I'm Bill Good, and welcome to those of you joining us this morning on the Chorus Radio Network. We continue to shine the spotlight on temporary foreign workers in Canada. The ongoing HD mining story has directed our attention to the issue of temporary foreign workers in Canada. My next guest says questions must be raised about the foreign workers program that go well beyond the issue of a handful of foreign miners from China for the HD mining project. The number of foreign workers in Canada has grown in the last decade from 101,098 in 2002 to 300,211 in 2011. So how many foreign workers hope to stay in Canada? How many stay here illegally and go underground when their contracts come to an end rather than return to their home countries? And why do we need so many foreign workers? Martin Collacott is spokesperson and chair of the advisory board with the Centre for Immigration Policy Reform, former Canadian ambassador in Asia and the Middle East. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much, Bill.
I wasn't shocked at the idea that we might have to bring in some highly skilled underground mining workers when I first heard the story, although I've since seen enough and read enough to seriously question the fact that Canadian workers couldn't have been trained. But what it did to me was it shone a spotlight on the fact that there were tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of foreign workers being brought in to do things like work at fast food restaurants. What other sorts of labor are we bringing in, and why do we need to bring in foreign workers to work in a fast food restaurant?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We've had certain kinds of temporary foreign worker programs for several decades. Live-in caregivers program, which has certain problems. Seasonal agricultural worker programs. They just come in for a few weeks every year and then they go home.
Do jobs that Canadians really are not lining up to do or to train to do.
Not at the wages that are being offered. That's a rather key phrase. In 2006, the government launched a major program to expand temporary foreign workers. Now, in principle, it sounds pretty good. We have a labor shortage. We can bring in temporary workers much more quickly than permanent immigrants, and you can deal with the immediate shortages, and then the people leave if they're no longer needed. But the massive expansion of the program initially was largely for skilled workers in specialized areas. But now it's expanded very widely into unskilled or lesser skilled people.
When I first heard about this, and it was a few years ago, it was in construction trades, primarily in Alberta. They were bringing in a lot of Mexican workers to do construction work, home construction, because there was a boom at the time.
Yeah.
And there was a shortage of Canadians to fill those jobs.
Now, the problem with these programs, and we haven't done much research on them in Canada, but they have in the United States, they found that there are all sorts of problems of different kinds. One is making sure that the people are really going to get paid the wages they're going to get paid, because unlike regular immigrants, they can only stay here as long as they have the job with their employer. So they're open to abuse. They then often don't want to leave at the end of their period, so they have a huge problem really of people staying on illegally. And there's an article in the Toronto Star last week saying by 2015 we're going to have a massive problem with illegals because of temporary foreign workers' contracts expiring.
So are we creating the kind of situation they already have in the United States, where they have literally millions of people who have come in illegally, often to do the jobs that are needed and that Americans aren't doing, whether they're gardeners or housekeepers or whatever, and wanting to stay?
Well, the question of jobs Americans aren't doing is basically because if you can get cheap foreign labor, you're not going to have to pay as much.
Right.
And then so the wages are lower. The main impact really of bringing in so many temporary foreign workers is that if you didn't bring them in, the fast food restaurants would simply find a shortage of workers. They'd have to pay their employees somewhat more money. So normal market...
to pay more for a double-double or a quarter
Not
pounder?
a heck of a lot more. The actual wage portion of what you get charged for your food in a restaurant is a relatively small proportion, but you wouldn't have large numbers of foreign workers coming in to do jobs that Canadians could do if you paid them enough. So this is the fundamental problem. But on top of that, if you bring in all these foreign workers, particularly the lesser skilled from poorer countries, they are going to want to stay here, and you're going to have a big problem of illegals here. Not only that, but the Americans had a big program in the agricultural sector during World War II, when a lot of American young men went overseas to fight. They allowed in a large number of Mexican workers legally. They ended that program in 1964. Interestingly, productivity went up because the agricultural producers had to find ways of producing, increasing productivity, and so on. But what then happened was large numbers of illegal Mexicans started coming in, having been spurred on by the stories from their cousins of how much money you could make in the States. That was the real start of the illegals problem in the United States. It started from temporary foreign worker programs.
Why do we bring them in as temporary foreign workers, though, if we are envisioning a labor shortage, a demographic issue that is raising its head now with a lot of baby boomers exiting the market? They've had fewer kids than their parents did. Would you dispute the fact that we're going to have a labor shortage, and we're going to, in many cases, want to keep these people and be able to employ them for a long time?
Yeah, I'd have to dispute that question.
Okay.
The sections of the private sector keep saying we have this massive looming labor shortage. We can only solve it through immigration. What we do have is labor shortages because very often there's a mismatch between what many Canadians are taking training in, like university courses, and what we need. If we got those things straightened out, and it's a complicated issue, we wouldn't have much of a labor shortage. And this has been said not only by the left, but it's been said, for instance, by Jock Finlayson, who's the vice president of the BC Business Council, who said, we don't have a labor shortage in BC, despite what the government says. We have a mismatch of skills, and if we could straighten that out, we can deal with most of our labor shortages domestically. And people on the left are saying the same thing. There's an interesting convergence of views. But
it doesn't take a great deal of skill to work for Tim Hortons or McDonald's.
No, and yet we brought in, Tim Hortons had permission to bring in over 14,000 people, mostly from the Philippines, since 2007, 3,200 in 2011 alone. Those are mostly low-skilled workers. And the problem is the employer likes it because they're loyal employees. They can't move on to another job.
No, and they're great people and they're hard workers.
And they are. I mean, the workers from the Philippines are hardworking, and they're usually very nice, helpful people. No question about that. But the question is, what does this do to Canadian workers? And the fact is that as long as you can rely on the supply of foreign workers, you're not going to improve the working conditions and the wages, because Canadians would do it. There are countries like Iceland that don't have immigration programs. They have to hire Icelanders to do this. The consumer pays slightly more for their coffee, but you bring in low-skilled workers, and if they stay indefinitely, they'll bring their families in. There's going to be a huge cost to the taxpayer, massive cost to the taxpayer in terms of social services, because the low-skilled workers, when they're here permanently, they're not going to pay much income tax, but they're going to get all the same social services as everyone else.
Talking with Martin Collacott, spokesperson and chair of the advisory board of the Centre for Immigration Policy Reform, and former Canadian ambassador in Asia and the Middle East. I welcome your calls, questions, comments to him. 604-280-9898. Do you employ temporary foreign workers? Perhaps you are one, but probably reluctant to speak. But if you're not, I'd love to hear from you. 604-280-9898. Toll free, 1-877-399-9898. You're with Bill Good on the Chorus Radio Network, and my phones are open to you. Talking about the foreign workers program, my guest, Martin Collacott, has done a lot of research on this, has studied the issue for a long time, done a lot of work on what you'd call regular immigration issues as well over the years.